The air in the gloom tasted of ozone, damp cobblestone, and goblin-brewed gin. It was a flavor Finnian O'Malley knew better than his own mother's stew, a permanent coating on the back of his tongue. He hunched deeper into the collar of his worn leather duster, the package cradled against his chest, and quickened his pace. Above, the perpetual twilight of the magical Undercity was pierced by the sputtering hiss of gas lamps hanging from unseen moorings, casting long, dancing shadows that could swallow a manhole. Floating market stalls drifted lazily past, vendors hawking everything from self-stirring cauldrons to bottled whispers. A fey creature with iridescent wings buzzed past his ear, trying to sell him a glamour charm. Finn swatted it away without looking. "Get lost, Tinkerbell. I'm not buying." The fey swore at him in a language that sounded like tiny, angry bells before zipping off into the gloom. Finn didn't care. He had one rule: get the package from point A to point B. Don't ask questions, don't look inside, and most importantly, don't get involved. Involvement was what got you a dishonorable discharge, a mountain of debt, and a one-way ticket to the arse end of magical London. This job was supposed to be easy. Milk Run, the client had called it. A simple pickup from a warlock in Nocturne Alley and a drop-off at an address in the Spire district. The pay was good, enough to keep the Gringotts goblins from breaking his kneecaps for another month. But the package itself felt wrong. It was heavy, circular, and wrapped in greasy oilcloth. It wasn't the weight that bothered him, but the hum. It was a low-frequency vibration that seemed to bypass his ears and settle deep in his bones. It wasn't magical, not in the way Finn understood magic. He'd spent a decade as an Auror, trained to sniff out illicit enchantments and dark curses. This felt different. It was a clean, potent thrum of pure energy, like a tuning fork struck against the fabric of reality. It made the hairs on his arms stand up and his Auror-trained instincts scream a silent warning. He ignored it. Instincts were a luxury he could no longer afford. The address led him to the base of one of the gloom's many improbable towers. This one was a crooked finger of soot-stained brick and gargoyle-encrusted balconies that defied gravity, leaning at a precarious angle over a narrow alleyway. A small, tarnished brass plaque read, "I Finch. Please knock." Loudly. "I'm old." Finn rolled his eyes and hammered his fist on the heavy oak door. For a long moment, there was only silence. He was about to knock again when a series of complex clicks and whirs echoed from within, like a dozen clockwork mechanisms coming to life. The door swung inward with a groan of ancient hinges. The man who stood in the doorway was both exactly what Finn expected and nothing like it. He had the requisite long white beard, which was tangled with what looked suspiciously like crumbs and half-moon spectacles perched on a nose that had been broken at least twice. But instead of grand wizarding robes, he wore a pair of baggy corduroy trousers, fuzzy slippers shaped like badgers, and a faded muggle t-shirt that read, "Frankie says relax." "Ah, right on time," the old man chirped, his eyes twinkling with a mischievous light. "You must be the courier. Do come in, don't dawdle. You're letting the drafts in, and they argue with the poltergeists." Finn stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind him with a resonant boom. The interior of the tower was a single, cavernous room that spiraled upwards into darkness. It was a catastrophe of organized chaos. Books were stacked in precarious pillars that threatened to collapse at any moment. Auroras of unknown solar systems spun lazily in midair. A half-eaten bag of Muggle crisps sat beside a glowing orb that pulsed with a soft, blue light. The air smelled of old paper, cinnamon, and something vaguely electrical. "Finnian O'Malley," the old wizard said, already turning his back and shuffling deeper into the clutter. "Formerly of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Specialty, defensive charms and counter-jinxes. Commendation for bravery during the Basilisk incident of 08. Dishonorably discharged in 15 for, yes. Reckless endangerment and gross deviation from protocol during the capture of the Shadow Syndicate." Finn's hand instinctively tightened on the package. "You've been reading my file." "Reading?" The wizard chuckled, waving a dismissive hand. "Good heavens, no. Far too much paperwork. I was there. Watched the whole thing in my scrying pool. You were very impressive, right up until you decided to bring down half a building to catch one warlock." A bit theatrical for my taste, but effective. He finally turned, a wide grin on his face. Alistair Finch. At your service. Right, Finn said flatly, unimpressed. Theatricality doesn't pay the bills. Here's your delivery. He held out the oilcloth-wrapped object. Finch's eyes lit up, all trace of whimsy gone, replaced by a sudden, intense focus. He took the package with a reverence that seemed out of place in the whimsical chaos of his home. The Aegis of Defiance. After all these years, with deft, surprisingly steady hands, he unwrapped it. The oilcloth fell away to reveal a shield. It was perfectly circular, about 2 feet in diameter, and made of a metal Finn didn't recognize. It wasn't goblin-forged silver or dwarven steel. It was a deep cobalt blue, with a single 5-pointed white star in the center, flanked by 2 concentric red rings. It was utterly devoid of magical runes or embellishments, yet the hum it emitted was now a palpable force in the room, making the floating dust motes dance. Splendid, Finch breathed, running a finger over the star. Absolutely splendid. He looked up at Finn. Would you care for a Jamie Dodger? I find they facilitate all manner of important transactions. I'll take my payment, Finn said, his patience wearing thin. In gold. Of course. Finch gestured vaguely toward a large, ornate pedestal in the center of the room. It was the only object free of dust. Just place it there for a moment, would you? My back isn't what it used to be. Finn gritted his teeth. The job was to deliver it to Finch, not redecorate his tower. But the sooner he did this, the sooner he got paid. He hefted the shield. It felt solid, balanced, an extension of his arm, and walked to the pedestal. The moment the metal of the shield touched the stone of the pedestal, the world went white. A deafening crack, like a thunderclap inside his skull, threw Finn back. He landed hard on the floor, his ears ringing. The energy that had been humming in the shield was now a raging torrent, blasting outwards in a wave of invisible force. Books flew from their stacks, glass vials shattered, and the glowing orb flickered and died. The energy wasn't magical. It was something purer, more fundamental. It felt like conviction, like a promise made solid. In the center of the room, where the pedestal had been, now stood a tall, crystalline shard of ice, easily 7 feet high. It hadn't been there a second ago. It glowed from within, and Finn could make out a dark shape suspended inside, the shape of a man. Oh dear, Finch said, sounding less concerned and more intrigued. He pushed his spectacles up his nose. That was not supposed to happen quite so dramatically. What the hell was that? Finn demanded, scrambling to his feet. What is this? That, Finch said, his voice now low and serious, is Plan B. The shield, now glowing with a fierce inner light, levitated off the shattered remains of the pedestal. It rotated once in the air and then shot forward, striking the crystal prison dead center. It didn't shatter it. It dissolved it. The ice turned to steam in an instant, hissing away into nothing. The man who had been inside stumbled forward, falling to one knee. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a square jaw and short-cropped blonde hair. He was dressed in a uniform that looked like it had been pulled from a history book, a brightly colored costume of red, white, and blue, with the same star emblem from the shield emblazoned on his chest. He looked around, his blue eyes wide with a profound, soul-deep confusion. The air around him smelled of clean linen and ozone. He pushed himself to his feet, a monument of muscle and bewildered dignity. The facility. It's been breached, he said, his voice a clear, firm baritone that felt out of place in the dusty tower. Where is Colonel Phillips? Report. What year is it? Finn stared, speechless. He'd seen transfigurations, polyjuice potions, and every manner of magical disguise. This was none of those. This man was real. The year, Finch said gently, stepping forward, is 2024, Captain. You've been on ice for quite a while. The captain's eyes locked onto Finch, then to Finn. He took in their strange clothes, the impossible tower, the magical debris scattered everywhere. His professional soldier's gaze missed nothing. Magic, he breathed, the word a curse. It's the Hydra Division. They've finally mastered their dark arts. Not quite, my boy, Finch said. My name is Alistair Finch. And you, Captain Sterling Valor, are very far from 1945. Valor swayed slightly, putting a hand to his temple. 80 years. He murmured, the reality of it hitting him like a physical blow. He looked down at his own hands, then back at the two men. Why? Why now? Because we need you, Finch said, his expression grim. The world is in more danger than you can possibly imagine. Finn had heard enough. This was no longer a delivery. This was a whole heap of, not my problem. Right, he said, making for the door. This has been fascinating. A real trip down memory lane. Now, about my payment. Your payment is irrelevant, Finch snapped, his voice suddenly losing all its grandfatherly warmth and gaining an edge of steel that made Finn freeze. This is no longer about gold, Mr. O'Malley. This is about survival. Finch waved his hand, and a large stone basin in the corner of the room filled with shimmering, silvery water. Look, he commanded. And understand why your debts no longer matter. Drawn by a morbid curiosity he couldn't deny, Finn moved closer. Captain Valor, his disorientation replaced by a steely resolve, stood beside him. They looked into the basin. The water swirled, and an image formed. It showed a young man with earnest eyes and fiery red hair, standing before the Wisengamot, the magical high court. He was radiating power, a golden aura shimmering around him. Kaelan Vance, Finch said softly. Born under a twin-tailed comet, marked with the ancient rune of power. Our prophesied, chosen one. The wizard who was meant to defeat the Dark Lord Malakor and bring an age of peace. I read about him in the Daily Prophet, Finn muttered. Hero of the Griffin War, youngest ever recipient of the Order of Merlin, first class. What happened to him? The image in the water shifted. It showed battlefields, magical explosions leveling cities. It showed corrupt ministry officials shaking hands with dark wizards in shadowy backrooms. It showed the endless, grinding suffering that the magical world's constant power struggles inflicted on ordinary people, both magical and non-magical. Kaelan was in every scene, his expression slowly hardening, the light in his eyes dimming, replaced by a cold, pragmatic fury. He saw what you saw, Mr. O'Malley, Finch said, his gaze fixed on Finn. The corruption, the incompetence, the futility of a system that is fundamentally broken. He saw that trying to save it was like trying to patch a sinking ship with spells. He decided it was better to sink it and build a new one from the wreckage. The final image formed, and a chill snaked its way up Finn's spine, colder than any Dementor's kiss. It showed Kaelan Vance, no longer a young hero but a man forged in the fires of his own disillusionment. His face was a mask of cold certainty, his eyes burning with fanaticism. He was standing side by side with a figure cloaked in shadow, a being of palpable darkness from whom all light seemed to flee. Lord Malakor. Good heavens, Captain Valor whispered, his face pale. He's joined the enemy. He no longer sees an enemy, Finch corrected, his voice heavy with sorrow. He sees a partner. Malakor offered him what the ministry never could, the power to impose absolute order. To stop the wars, the corruption, the suffering, by crushing all dissent. By enforcing a peace of the grave. Kaelan believes that absolute control is the only true path to salvation. He believes he is the hero. Finn felt a knot of dread tighten in his stomach. He dealt with dark wizards, rogue werewolves, and all manner of magical filth. But this was different. A chosen one with the power to level nations, twisted by cynicism into the ultimate tyrant. It was a nightmare. He took a step back, shaking his head. No, not my fight. I'm done with chosen ones and prophecies. Last time I trusted the system, it threw me out like trash. He pointed a trembling finger at Finch. The job was to deliver the shield. I delivered it. Now pay me and I'm gone. You can't go, Finch said, his gaze unwavering. The moment that shield activated, it sent a beacon of ethos energy across the entire magical spectrum. A power that Kaelan has been hunting for years. His forces already know you are here. They know the captain is awake. Captain Valor straightened up, his fists clenching. He looked like a statue of heroism come to life. Let them come. I've faced down tyrants before. This Malakor and his misguided apprentice will be no different. They are very different, Captain, Finch warned. Kaelan is one of the most powerful wizards alive, and he doesn't fight with honor. He commands legions of shadow-wielding assassins and creatures of the dark. He is a tactician who uses his immense power with chilling precision. Finn finally reached the door, his hand on the iron handle. He had to get out. He had to disappear before this spiraled any further. You can run, Mr. O'Malley, Finch's voice echoed in the suddenly silent room. You can try to lose yourself in the magical underworld. But Kaelan is not trying to conquer the magical world. He and Malakor want to burn it all down, the veil, the ministries, everything, and rebuild it under their absolute rule. There will be no corner of this world, magical or mundane, for you to run to. Finn's hand froze on the handle. Everything he'd been running from, everything he'd been trying to escape, the politics, the greater good, the high-stakes battles, had just landed on his doorstep, wrapped in a star-spangled shield. Finch took a step closer, his ancient eyes boring into Finn's, seeing past the cynicism and the debt to the disgraced Auror underneath. You wanted to get paid, Finnian O'Malley? Consider this your new job. The pay is the continued existence of the world. And your first payment, he said with a grim finality, is a head start. Because they are coming for us. Right now. The gloom was a symphony of organized chaos, and Finnian O'Malley was its reluctant conductor. He moved through the throng of the nocturne bazaar with the practiced ease of a man who knew which cobblestones were loose and which floating stalls were likely to drip goblin brewed ale on your head. Flickering gas lamps, their flames a kaleidoscope of enchanted blues and purples, cast long, dancing shadows across a river of wizards, witches, hags, and creatures that defied easy description. The air, thick with the scent of roasted mandrake root, potion fumes, and damp stone, was a perfume Finn had long since grown accustomed to. It was the two men trailing him he couldn't get used to. Behind him, a walking, talking primary-colored bull in a china shop. Captain Sterling Valor, in his ridiculously vibrant uniform of cerulean blue and crimson, was a beacon of unsubtlety in a world that thrived on shadows. His square jaw was set in a look of perpetual, wide-eyed wonder, his gaze darting from a trio of pixies selling stolen spectacles to a troll haggling over the price of a squirming sack of grubs. He was so clean, so bright, he practically squeaked. Fascinating. Valor's voice boomed, causing a nearby warlock to drop a jar of pickled nude eyes with a startled curse. This entire marketplace floats on nothing but arcane energies. The sheer ingenuity is astounding. Back in my day, we were lucky if we could get a B-17 to stay aloft with both engines running. Keep your voice down, will you? Finn hissed over his shoulder, pulling the collar of his worn leather coat higher. You're about as inconspicuous as a dragon at a garden party. We're supposed to be on a clandestine mission, not leading the ruddy parade. A man of integrity has nothing to hide, Finnian, Valor replied, his tone earnest and unwavering. It was the same tone he used for everything, from discussing tactical strategy to commenting on the weather. It was maddening. Bringing up the rear, and somehow managing to be both the source of their problems and utterly unconcerned by them, was Archmage Finch. The ancient wizard ambled along with a blissful smile, his long silver beard threatening to get caught in the paper wrapper of the muggle confectionery he was devouring. Oh, lighten up, my boy, Finch mumbled around a mouthful of chocolate and caramel. Sterling is simply appreciating the local color. Have you ever tried a curly-whirly? It's a marvel of non-magical engineering. All that braided toffee, genius. Finn shot a withering glare at the Archmage. The local color wants to pick our pockets and sell our organs for potion ingredients. The less they notice us, the better our chances of keeping said organs. Finch simply chuckled, offering the sticky treat to Valor, who politely declined with a look of profound confusion. Our destination is just ahead. The celestial aura. Been out of commission for 2 centuries, ever since the chief astronomer had a rather messy incident with a misaligned teleportation charm and a black hole. Now it's just a dusty old relic repository. And our objective? Valor asked, his attention snapping from a floating fishmonger's stall to Finch, all business once more. The Chronos compass, Finch said, popping the last of his candy into his mouth. an artifact capable of tracking significant magical signatures across localized spatiotemporal streams. In layman's terms, it can point us to the other artifacts we need before Kaelan finds them. They turned off the main thoroughfare, ducking into an alley so narrow their shoulders brushed the slimy, moss-covered brick on either side. The cacophony of the bazaar faded, replaced by the rhythmic drip of water and the distant hum of the city's magical core. The alley opened into a small, forgotten square dominated by a towering structure of verdigris-coated brass and dark, stained glass. The celestial aura. It looked like a giant, mechanical spider frozen mid-stride, its domed roof cracked open to the perpetually twilight sky of the gloom. Right, Finn said, rubbing his hands together. He surveyed the building, his aura training kicking in despite his best efforts to suppress it. The main entrance is a death trap. Arcane locks, pressure plate curses, the works. There's a service hatch on the third-floor balcony, likely only protected by a simple corrosion charm and a colony of angry flesh-eating gnomes. I can bypass the charm and you, he jabbed a thumb at Valor, can handle the gnomes. We're in and out in 10 minutes. Valor frowned, his brow furrowing. Where to break in? Like common thieves. Finn rolled his eyes so hard he felt a muscle twinge. No, we're going to knock and ask politely if they'll lend us the priceless, world-saving artifact. Use your head. This is how it's done. Quick, quiet, and no one gets hurt. My head tells me that heroism is not born from skulking in the shadows, Valor retorted, planting his feet. His posture radiated disapproval. Our cause is just. We should approach the front gate, announce our intention, and disable the wards with honor. A direct approach leaves no room for misinterpretation. It also leaves no room for breathing when you've got a dozen curse bolts turning your insides into jam. Finn snapped, his voice a low, furious growl. This isn't your black and white war, Captain. This is the gloom. There are no rules, no honor. There is only survival. My way is survival. Your way is the coward's way, Valor said, his voice dangerously calm. The air crackled with a tension that had nothing to do with magic. Finch watched them with a curious, almost amused glint in his ancient eyes. I'm still alive, aren't I? Finn shot back, the words tasting like acid. That's more than can be said for a lot of honorable Aurors I knew. People who thought a just cause was a shield. It isn't. A shield is a shield, and a quick disabling jinx from behind is better than a noble death any day of the week. The two men stood locked in a stalemate of ideologies, the cynical survivor versus the unwavering symbol. One shaped by a world of gray compromises, the other forged in the crucible of a righteous war. If I may, Finch interjected, stepping between them. You are both correct. And both terribly wrong. Sterling, your directness would alert every agent Kaelan has in a 5-mile radius. Finnian, your plan with the gnomes is, well, it's messy and those little blighters have a nasty bite. He pointed a long bony finger at a grime-caked drain pipe that ran up the side of the orrery, leading to a shattered pane in a high window. However, that pipe appears structurally sound, and the wards on that particular window were tied to the astronomer's life force. Since he is currently smeared across the Sagittarius constellation, they are, shall we say, inactive. He gave them a wink. A compromise. A direct, dishonorable climb. Satisfactory. Finn grumbled but couldn't argue with the logic. Valor gave a stiff, reluctant nod. Very well. A tactical assent. See? Teamwork, Finch chirped. The climb was undignified. Finn, lithe and used to navigating the gloom's treacherous architecture, went first. Finch, with a whispered levitation charm, simply floated up. Valor, however, insisted on climbing hand over hand, his ethos-fueled strength allowing him to find purchase on the slick, corroded metal, but his bulk and bright uniform made the entire exercise feel utterly ridiculous. They slipped through the broken window into a cavernous, circular room. Dust motes thick as snowflakes danced in the slivers of purple light piercing the dome above. A colossal, intricate model of the solar system, crafted from brass, silver, and glowing gemstones, dominated the space. Its gears were frozen, its planet still. And in the very center, where the sun should have been, was a pedestal. On it rested a device that looked like a brass astrolabe fused with a compass, its needle twitching erratically. The Chronos compass. Finch breathed, his usual levity replaced by a note of reverence. As the Archmage approached the pedestal, Finn's instincts screamed. His years as an Auror, and the paranoid years that followed, had honed a sixth sense for trouble. The air was too still. The silence too heavy. "Finch, wait," he whispered. But it was too late. The moment Finch's fingers brushed the compass, the room plunged into an absolute, suffocating darkness. It wasn't just the absence of light. It was a physical presence, a cold, heavy blanket that smothered sound and chilled the skin. A shadow spell. High-level umbral magic. Contact. Valor's voice was a sharp, disciplined bark, but it sounded strangely muffled. Finn didn't waste a second. Asterisk Lumos Maxima. Asterisk, he yelled, a bead of pure white light erupting from the tip of his wand. But it didn't illuminate the room. The magical darkness drank it, swallowing the spell a mere foot from its source, leaving him in a tiny, flickering bubble of defiance. Then they came. They didn't have footsteps. They were silent wraiths, coalescing from the deepest pockets of the manufactured night. Finn caught a glimpse of one in his dwindling light, a slender figure clad in matte black leather, its face hidden by a porcelain mask devoid of features. In its hand, it held a dagger of what looked like solid shadow, a blade that didn't reflect light but consumed it. Finn's Auror training took over. Asterisk Protego. Asterisk, a shimmering, transparent shield erupted in front of him, just as two of the shadow daggers struck it. The shield cracked, spiderwebbing with dark energy. The impact sent a jolting shock up his arm. These weren't street thugs. They were elite. A golden light flared to his left. Valor. Even without a target to see, his conviction was its own beacon. For truth and justice, he roared. His fist, glowing with the soft, internal luminescence of his ethos power, connected with something in the dark. There was a sickening wet crunch, followed by the hiss of dissipating shadow. Less talking, more punching. Finn yelled, firing a chain of stun jinxes into the oppressive blackness. Most fizzled out, but one connected, earning him a pained grunt. "We need light," Valor shouted, fending off another unseen attacker. "I cannot fight what I cannot see." "I'm working on it," came Finch's strained voice from the center of the room. "This is a grade 7 umbral weave. It's tied to the assassins themselves. Give me a moment." An assassin lunged out of the darkness at Finn. He parried its blade with his wand, the crackle of magic against solidified shadow grating on his nerves. The creature was fast, unnaturally so. It flowed around his defenses, its movements fluid and predatory. He was being driven back, his shield spells cracking faster than he could recast them. He saw another golden flash as Valor bodily threw one of the attackers across the room. The captain was a whirlwind of righteous fury, a bastion of physical power against their ethereal magic. But there were too many of them. For everyone he struck down, two more seemed to melt from the walls. Finn stumbled backward over a fallen telescope, landing hard on his back. The featureless mask of an assassin loomed over him, its shadow dagger raised for a final, silent strike. He scrambled to bring his wand up, but he knew he wouldn't be fast enough. Suddenly, a blue and red streak slammed into the creature, sending it flying into the gears of the orrery, with a clang of metal and a final, whispery sigh. Valor stood over Finn, his hand outstretched. His uniform was slashed in several places, but his eyes burned with unwavering resolve. "On your feet, soldier," he said, his voice a low growl. "This fight isn't over." Finn took the offered hand, allowing the super soldier to haul him to his feet. For a fleeting second, he felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years, the reassurance of having someone watching his back. He immediately stamped it out. Trust was a liability. Asterisk Fulmina Diurna. Asterisk Finch's voice suddenly boomed with the power of a thunderclap. A blinding, pure white sun erupted from the center of the room. It wasn't a fire spell. It was the concept of daylight made manifest. The magical darkness evaporated with a collective, agonizing shriek from the assassins. Blinking against the sudden glare, Finn saw them clearly for the first time. There were 5 of them left, recoiling from the light, their shadow forms smoking as if touched by acid. Finch stood by the pedestal, one hand holding the glowing Chronos compass, the other pointed at the ceiling, from which his sun's spell blazed. The assassins exchanged a glance, a silent communication passing between them. Their mission had failed. The leader, distinguished by a silver filigree on its mask, pointed its obsidian dagger not at Valor or Finch, but directly at Finn. Its voice was a chilling rasp, like dry leaves skittering across a tombstone. Finnian O'Malley, the shattered prophecy knows you. He knows the guilt you carry from the Silverwood incident. He knows what you ran from. Finn's blood ran cold. The Silverwood incident. The disastrous mission that had ended his career, that haunted his nightmares. No one was supposed to know the details of his failure. The assassin continued, its voice dripping with a cold, hollow promise. You run for coin now, little courier. But there is not enough gold in all the vaults to buy you a place to hide. He will unmake you. With that, the assassins dissolved. They didn't run or teleport. They simply melted back into the natural shadows of the room, leaving nothing behind but a lingering chill and the weight of their words. The Archmage's sun's spell faded, returning the orrery to the dim, dusty twilight. The silence that descended was heavier than the darkness had been. Valor stepped forward, clapping a hand on Finn's shoulder. It was meant to be reassuring, but it felt like a brand. Vile cowards, threatening a man instead of facing him. Pay them no mind, Finnian. Their words are empty, but Finn knew they weren't. He pulled away from Valor's touch, his face a pale, grim mask. He stared at the spot where the assassin had stood, his mind reeling. Kaelan Vance, the chosen one, the supposed savior, knew his deepest, most shameful secret. This wasn't just a job anymore. It wasn't about paying off a debt or earning a score. It was personal. He had taken this job to run from his past. Now, his past was hunting him, wearing the face of the world's most powerful apostate. The walls were closing in, and for the first time in a long time, Finnian O'Malley felt the cold, sharp sting of genuine fear. The safe house was anything but. To call it a house was a gross overstatement. Archmage Finch's bolt hole was a chaotic pocket dimension crammed into the space between 2 soot-stained brick buildings in the deepest part of the gloom. Inside, the air tasted of dust, dried herbs, and the faint, electric tang of contained power. Books were stacked in precarious towers that defied gravity, their leather spines whispering forgotten lore. A gramophone played a scratchy tune from a bygone era, a stark contrast to the grim reality pressing in on them. Finn O'Malley paced the length of the cramped room, the frayed nerves from their recent ambush still thrumming under his skin. The memory of Kaelan Vance's shadow assassins, silent, flowing constructs of pure darkness, was a fresh wound. They had escaped by the skin of their teeth, a feat owed more to Finch's labyrinthine knowledge of the gloom's secret ways than to any skill of his own. We were nearly filleted back there, Finn muttered, running a hand through his already messy hair. They knew where we were going. How did they know? His paranoia, a well-honed survival instinct from his courier days, was screaming. Captain Sterling Valor sat stiffly in a wingback chair that had seen better centuries. He was methodically cleaning a deep gash on his vibranium alloy shield, his brow furrowed in concentration. The ambush had been his first true taste of modern magical combat, and the quiet intensity in his eyes told Finn that the 1940s super soldier was processing a world far more complex and treacherous than the one he'd left behind. They are resourceful, Valor said, his voice a low baritone that seemed to absorb the room's anxiety. But we prevailed. We must focus on the next step, not dwell on what-ifs. What-ifs are what keep you alive, Sterling, Finn retorted, stopping his pacing to glare at the captain. In my line of work, you plan for the worst-case scenario. The worst-case scenario even. You waltz in expecting a fair fight, you end up as a smear on the cobblestones. And you expect treachery around every corner, Valor countered, setting the shield aside. A life lived in constant suspicion is a fortress without windows, Finn. It keeps you safe, but you cannot see the light. Before Finn could craft a suitably cynical reply, Alistair Finch bustled into the room, levitating a tray laden with a steaming teapot and 3 mismatched cups. He wore a velvet smoking jacket covered in embroidered constellations, and his eyes twinkled with an unnerving calm. The philosophical stylings of the pragmatist and the paladin. The Archmage chirped, setting the tray down on a stack of grimoires. Delightful. But time, I'm afraid, is a luxury we no longer possess. He poured the tea, a fragrant, steaming brew that smelled of bergamot and something faintly like lightning. Kaelan may have failed to stop us, but he knows what we are after. He knows we seek the artifacts of confluence. Finn took a cup, the warmth a small comfort. We have the shield. What's next on the magical mystery tour? Finch's expression grew serious. The Chronos compass. It does not point north, but rather to the weakest point in a timeline, a moment of profound flux. It is the key to finding a place outside of time, a nexus where we might be able to sever Malakor's connection to the power he draws from the mortal world. Valor leaned forward, his focus absolute. Where is this compass? Hidden, of course, Finch said with a theatrical sigh. Tucked away in a place few have the courage or folly to enter. The sunken scriptorium. Finn nearly dropped his cup. You're joking. The scriptorium? Below the Thames? It's been flooded for a century, sealed by the ministry. It's a tomb, not a treasure chest. Precisely why no one has thought to look there. Finch beamed. The ministry seals were designed to keep out common intruders, not an archmage of my caliber. The compass is protected by temporal wards. A tricky business, but manageable. He clapped his hands together. We leave in 1 hour. As Finch pottered off to gather the necessary components for his ward-breaking spell, a faint, shimmering light coalesced in the corner of the room. It pulsed with a soft green glow, forming into the shape of a tiny winged pixie, a pixiegram, the magical world's equivalent of a secure text message. It hovered expectantly in front of Finn. His gut clenched. It was a summons from a contact, a fence named Silas who dealt in restricted potion ingredients. Finn had been waiting on this for weeks. A job. A big one. Enough gold to clear a significant portion of his debt. Valor watched him, a questioning look on his face. What is that? Business, Finn said, his voice clipped. He waved his hand, and the pixie whispered its message into his ear, its voice like the chime of tiny bells. The job was a simple handoff, a milk run as Silas called it. A sealed case, no questions asked. The drop point was the old mariner's warehouse, not far from the scriptorium's hidden entrance. The pay was staggering. The gears in Finn's mind turned with frantic speed. His goal had always been simple. Get paid, get out. This was his ticket. He could do the drop, meet back up with the captain and the old wizard, and be a small fortune richer. They wouldn't even have to know the full story. He'd just say he was scouting the area. It was pragmatic. It was efficient. It was the O'Malley way. He dismissed the pixie with another wave. Just tying up a loose end. Don't worry about it. Valor's blue eyes narrowed. He didn't press the issue, but a line of disapproval was etched onto his brow. The hero saw the flicker of selfishness, the familiar shadow of Finn's self-interest, and he did not like it. The entrance to the sunken scriptorium was hidden behind a perception filter woven into the graffiti-covered wall of a sewer tunnel beneath the embankment. The air was thick with the stench of the river and centuries of decay. Finch chanted in a low, resonant language, his hands tracing glowing runes in the air. The brick wall shimmered and melted away, revealing a dark, spiraling staircase descending into black, stagnant water. Charming, Finn muttered, peering into the abyss. Definitely a 5-star destination. The reviews must be glowing. The wards will keep the water at bay once we are inside, Finch assured them, stepping through the portal. But stay close. The temporal echoes in this place can be disorienting. They descended into a breathtaking, impossible space. The scriptorium was a vast, circular library, miraculously dry within a shimmering bubble of ancient magic. Water from the Thames pressed in on all sides, the faint London light filtering through it, casting rippling, ethereal patterns across the towering shelves. Books, scrolls, and codices were chained to their places, preserved against the ravages of time. The silence was profound, broken only by the faint, rhythmic pulse of the temporal wards. Right then, Finn said, his voice unnaturally loud in the stillness. Where's this timey-wimey compass? Finch pointed a long, bony finger towards the center of the chamber. It rests on the lectern of ages, naturally. But the path is a puzzle. The floor is a temporal maze. A wrong step could send you back to breakfast, or forward to your own funeral. I must attune myself to the ward's frequency to chart us a safe course. It will take a few moments of absolute concentration. As Finch closed his eyes and began to hum, a low, resonating note that made the air vibrate, Finn saw his chance. The mariner's warehouse was just a short walk away on the surface. He could be there and back before Finch finished his magical tune-up. The gold was a siren's call, drowning out the quiet voice of caution in his head. He sidled up to Valor, who was staring in awe at the otherworldly library. "Sterling, I need to pop out for a minute." Valor turned, his expression instantly hardening. "Leave? Now." "Finn, we are in the heart of enemy territory. After what happened?" "It's not a debate, it's a necessity." Finn lied, his voice a low, urgent whisper. "I'm running a counter-surveillance sweep. Checking hour 6. The ambush spooked me. I want to make sure we weren't followed. Lay down a few false trails. It's basic Auror protocol." He hated using his old life as a justification, but it was the only thing Valor might respect. The captain's face was a war of conflicting emotions. His ingrained sense of duty fought with his growing distrust of Finn's methods. He remembered the pixiegram, the shifty look in Finn's eyes. "Your protocols seem to involve a great deal of secrecy and personal benefit," Valor said, his voice cold. "My protocols keep people alive," Finn shot back, his own defensiveness flaring into anger. "Something you might want to consider before you next charge headfirst into a spellstorm. I'll be back in 20 minutes. Meet me by the entrance. Just stay put until I get back." Without waiting for a reply, Finn turned and jogged back up the spiral staircase, his heart pounding a guilty rhythm against his ribs. He ignored the feeling. Guilt didn't pay the bills. He emerged back into the grimy sewer tunnel, the scriptorium's entrance sealing behind him. The air on the surface was thick with rain and fog, a perfect cover. He pulled his collar up and melted into the labyrinthine alleys of the gloom, the heavy weight of the sealed case he was meant to pick up already feeling like a lead ingot in his imagination. The mariner's warehouse was a derelict skeleton of a building, looming over a rarely used dock. The rendezvous was supposed to be on the second floor. As Finn ascended the creaking iron staircase, every instinct screamed at him. The ambush. His paranoia. The job was too easy, the pay too high. He drew his wand. The familiar weight of the Rowan would a small comfort. The second floor was a vast, empty space, littered with debris. Moonlight streamed through grimy, broken windows, illuminating dancing dust motes. In the center of the room, on a wooden crate, sat a small, sealed case, just as Silas had promised. "Too easy. You came," a voice echoed through the cavernous room. It was smooth as polished obsidian and just as cold. Finn froze, spinning around. A figure emerged from the deepest shadows. Tall, dressed in immaculate black robes, with silver hair that seemed to drink the moonlight. It was Kaelan Vance. He wasn't a projection. He was here. Alone. "I knew you couldn't resist, O'Malley," Kaelan said, a faint, condescending smile on his lips. "I read your ministry file. Disgraced. Dishonored. Drowning in debt. Your greed is so predictable. A simple pixiegram with a promise of gold, and you abandon your post like a dog chasing a treat." A sickening, cold dread washed over Finn, colder than the river water held at bay in the scriptorium. This wasn't a job. It was a diversion. "What do you want, Vance?" Finn spat, raising his wand. Kaelan chuckled, a sound devoid of warmth. "Want? I already have it. I don't want you, you pathetic relic. You're just the bait. I wanted the Archmage. And you, in your infinite self-interest, served him to me on a silver platter." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Finn's mind raced, connecting the dots with horrifying speed. The easy job. The isolated location. The time it would take him to get here and back. Kaelan hadn't laid a trap for him. He had laid a trap for Finch, using Finn as the unwitting key. "While you were chasing ghosts and gold," Kaelan continued, his voice dripping with mock sympathy, My acolytes were engaging your star-spangled friend. A noisy, flashy distraction to keep him occupied while I dealt with the real prize. Finn didn't wait for another word. He fired a stunner, a bolt of red light that Kaelan deflected with an effortless flick of his wrist. Finn didn't care. He wasn't trying to win. He was trying to escape. He spun on his heel and sprinted for the stairs, his lungs burning, his mind screaming. He burst out of the warehouse and ran, harder than he had ever run in his life. The gloom's alleys were a blur of rain-slicked stone and flickering gaslights. He pushed his magic into his legs, ignoring the burn, propelling himself forward with desperate speed. Asterisk, please be wrong. Please let him be lying, asterisk. He reached the sewer entrance, his breath tearing at his throat, and plunged back into the darkness. The perception filter was still there. He stumbled through it, his feet clattering on the spiral staircase. The scene at the bottom stopped his heart. The shimmering bubble of protective magic was gone. The scriptorium was flooded with murky, chest-high water. Books and scrolls floated like corpses on the surface. In the center of the room, the lectern of ages was shattered, and the Chronos compass was a wreck of twisted brass and cracked crystal. And there was Captain Valor. He was slumped against a pillar, half submerged in the filthy water. His uniform was torn, his face bruised and bleeding from a cut on his forehead. His shield lay beside him, bearing a new, spider-webbing network of cracks radiating from a scorch mark that glowed with a faint, malevolent energy. But it was the look in his eyes that shattered Finn. The unshakable, 1940s optimism was gone, replaced by a hollow, devastating emptiness. Valor, Finn whispered, wading through the cold water toward him. The captain looked up, and for the first time, Finn saw pure, undiluted fury directed at him. It was worse than any physical blow. He took him, Finn. Valor's voice was a ragged rasp, heavy with failure and grief. It was a trap. They came from everywhere. Shadows. They kept me busy, fighting for my life. And while I was fighting them, he choked on the words, gesturing with a shaking hand toward the ruined lectern. Kaelan just walked past me. He put Finch in some kind of crystal stasis. He didn't even look at me. The shame hit Finn with the force of a physical impact, knocking the air from his lungs. This was his fault. Every bit of it. His greed. His selfishness. His shortcut. He had cut a corner, just like the old days, and the price was Alistair Finch. Sterling, I didn't know, he stammered, the words tasting like ash. You didn't want to know. Valor roared, surging to his feet, water cascading off him. He grabbed Finn by the front of his jacket, his grip like iron. I questioned you. I knew something was wrong, and you fed me a line about protocol. You chose a few pieces of gold over the fate of the world. Over him. Finn didn't struggle. He deserved this. He deserved all of it. He could only look into the eyes of the broken hero he had helped create. I'm sorry, was all he could manage. The words pitiful and small in the vast, ruined chamber. Valor shoved him away, and Finn stumbled back into the water. The captain's anger seemed to drain away, leaving only the hollowed-out shell of defeat. Then, a faint shimmer appeared in the air above the wrecked compass. It was a mote of dark magic, a parting gift from Kaelan. It coalesced into a single, spectral playing card, a Queen of Swords, which fluttered down and landed on the water's surface before Finn. Kaelan's voice, a chilling, disembodied whisper, filled the scriptorium. Asterisk, your mentor awaits you at my master's table, O'Malley. At Blackwood Spire. He sends his regards. Asterisk, a pause, laden with contempt. Asterisk, come and get him. But I suggest you come alone. Your champion has proven disappointing. Asterisk. The spectral card dissolved, and the voice vanished, leaving only the sound of dripping water and Valor's ragged breathing. The insult, the direct challenge, seemed to reignite something in the captain. He looked from the spot where the card had been to Finn, his expression hardening, the hollow grief being replaced by a core of pure, unyielding resolve. The defeat was gone, forged into purpose. Finn looked down at his own shaking hands, then back at Valor. The choice was brutally clear. He could run, as he had always planned, and let the world burn, or he could stand and fix the catastrophe he had created. For the first time, the choice wasn't about gold or debt or even his own survival. It was about the twinkling eyes of an old man who had trusted him. He met the captain's gaze, his own shame and guilt solidifying into a decision. He had made this mess. He would unmake it. "He's wrong," Finn said, his voice quiet but steady, a vow spoken into the ruins of their failure. "He's wrong about you. And he's wrong about me." Valor picked up his damaged shield. His jaw sat like granite. He looked at Finn, not with forgiveness, but with the grim acknowledgement of a shared, terrible purpose. "We go together." Chapter 4: The Hero and the Hinge of Fate. The air inside Citadel Umbra was stale with the weight of absolute order. It tasted of cold stone and ozone, a sterile silence broken only by the rhythmic, unervingly synchronized footsteps of the Ascendant Guard. Finn found he missed the chaotic symphony of the gloom, the hiss of alchemical pipes, the haggle of goblin merchants, the distant roar of a poorly contained grimoire. Here, there was only the suffocating hum of disciplined power. Lord Malakor's fortress, now Kaelan's seat of command, was a brutalist spike of obsidian thrusting into the perpetually overcast sky of its own pocket dimension. Jagged architecture drank the light, and the very walls seemed to pulse with a dark, regulated magic that made Finn's teeth ache. "This isn't peace," Captain Valor whispered, his voice a low rumble of disapproval. They were crouched behind a buttress of polished black rock, watching a patrol of guards march past. Their movements were flawless, their expressions vacant. "It's a tomb with a pulse." "One man's tomb is another's perfectly managed high-security living arrangement," Finn retorted, his own whisper sharp with tension. He was peering at the arcane ward shimmering over the grand archway ahead. It was a lattice of crackling crimson energy, designed to atomize any unsanctioned magical signature. Kaelan's taken a page out of the old ministry's book. Overwhelm with power, intimidate with architecture. Classic tyrant stuff. "How do we get past that?" Valor asked, his hand resting on the grip of the circular shield strapped to his back. "I doubt a good right hook will do the trick." Finn smirked, a sliver of his old self. "Probably not. But a bad Auror trick might." From a worn leather pouch at his belt, he pulled a flat, slate-gray disc etched with a spiral rune. A null rune. Standard issue for breaching illegal wizarding dens, and one of the few things he'd kept from his old life. "This won't break it, but it'll give us a blind spot. A 3-second window. When I slap this on the stone, you run. Don't think, don't hesitate. Just move." Valor nodded, his jaw set. The captain's boundless optimism had been tempered by the harsh realities of their quest, but his resolve had been forged into something harder, sharper. He trusted Finn now. It was a heavy, unfamiliar weight on Finn's shoulders, and for the first time in a decade, he felt a desperate need not to buckle beneath it. Finch's capture was a raw wound, a direct result of his own selfish paranoia during the ambush. Never again, he'd sworn. "Ready?" Finn breathed. "Born ready, son." Finn took a deep, steadying breath, the cold air burning his lungs. He slapped the null rune onto the wall beside the archway. The slate disc flared with a silent, violet light, and for a heartbeat, a human-sized gap appeared in the crimson ward, the air within it shimmering like a heat haze. Valor exploded into motion. He was a blur of blue and white, his ethos-powered body moving with a speed that defied physics. He cleared the archway in 2 powerful strides. Finn was right behind him, diving through the gap just as the 3-second window slammed shut. The null rune crumbled to dust, its single purpose fulfilled. They were in. The interior was a cavernous hall, stark and cold, banners bearing a new sigil, a balanced scale pierced by a single, unblinking eye hung from the high, vaulted ceiling. More Ascendant guards stood like statues at every junction. "No alarms," Valor noted, his voice tight. "He's expecting us," Finn concluded grimly. "Kaelan's not an idiot. He's a fanatic. He thinks he's the hero. And every hero needs a final confrontation with the misguided souls who stand in their way." "Then let's not disappoint him," Valor said, unstrapping the shield. The polished metal seemed to hum with a quiet energy, a stark contrast to the oppressive magic around them. Their ascent through the citadel was a brutal exercise in teamwork. They moved through service corridors and forgotten stairwells, Finn using his Auror training to anticipate patrol routes and disable monitoring charms. When they were forced to fight, they were a devastatingly efficient pair. In a narrow causeway, they were cornered. Guards advanced from both sides, their staves crackling with contained shadow magic. "I'll take the front," Valor yelled, planting his feet. He became a bulwark, his shield absorbing volley after volley of dark energy bolts that would have flayed the skin from a lesser man. The impacts boomed like thunder, but he didn't budge an inch. His conviction was his armor. Finn, meanwhile, worked his own magic. He wasn't a powerhouse like Kaelan or a master strategist like Finch. He was a street-level survivor. He flicked his wand, and a slick of enchanted oil spread across the floor behind Valor, sending the rear guard slipping and sliding into a chaotic pile. A sharp, cutting hex severed the crystal focus on a sergeant's staff, causing it to overload in a shower of harmless purple sparks. He didn't fight with overwhelming force. He fought by pulling the rug out from under his opponents, literally and figuratively. It was the corner cutting that had gotten him discharged, now refined into a weapon for a righteous cause. They broke through, leaving a trail of unconscious, groaning guards in their wake. As they reached the final ascent, a grand, spiraling staircase leading to the citadel's apex, the ambient magic grew stronger, colder. "He's up there," Valor stated, his eyes fixed on the throne room doors at the top of the stairs. "I can feel it." "The wrongness. That's the shattered prophecy for you," Finn muttered, checking the charge on his wand. All the power of a chosen one with none of the pesky moral limitations. He paused, looking at the captain. "You know, when Finch first told me about you, I thought you were a joke. A museum piece. A walking piece of propaganda." Valor met his gaze, his expression unreadable. And now Finn hesitated, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. "Now I think you're the only thing in this whole cursed world that makes any sense. Don't go getting a big head about it." A rare, genuine smile touched Valor's lips. "Wouldn't dream of it, Finn." The throne room doors, massive slabs of obsidian inlaid with veins of pulsing silver, swung open on their own accord. The chamber beyond was vast and circular, its ceiling an enchanted starscape showing a cold, alien sky. At the center of the room, floating in a crystalline cage of pure force, was Archmage Finch. He looked tired, his usual twinkle diminished, but he gave them a faint, encouraging nod. And standing before him, his back to them, was Kaelan Vance. He wore robes of immaculate black and gray, his posture one of absolute, unshakable confidence. He turned slowly, and his face was a mask of placid disappointment. There were no signs of monstrous evil, no twisted features. He was handsome, his eyes a piercing blue filled not with malice, but with a profound, sorrowful certainty. "Finnian O'Malley," Kaelan said, his voice calm and resonant. "I admit I'm surprised. I thought you, of all people, would understand the necessity of this. No more corrupt ministries. No more veil fractures caused by petty squabbles. No more pointless suffering. Just order." "I've seen your order, Kaelan." Finn shot back, stepping forward, his wand held ready. "It's a cage. A pretty one, sure, but a cage all the same. You just traded one set of problems for another. Freedom is the right of every sentient being." Captain Valor's voice boomed, echoing in the vast chamber. He moved to stand beside Finn, a pillar of righteous indignation. "You've stolen that from them." Kaelan's expression tightened with a flicker of frustration. Freedom? Was it freedom for a child in Nocturne Alley to starve because her father couldn't afford potion ingredients? Was it freedom for entire villages to be wiped out in the last Goblin War because the Ministry bungled negotiations? "I watched it all. I was the one they sent to clean up the messes." He gestured around the room, a sweep of his arm that encompassed his entire philosophy. "I offer a world without pain. A world where everyone is safe, provided they follow the path. A single, guiding hand to prevent humanity, magical and non-magical, from destroying itself." Malakor saw the logic in it. He merely lacked the vision to implement it with compassion. "There's no compassion in a boot on the neck," Finn growled. Such a limited perspective. Kaelan sighed and then he moved. He didn't brandish a wand. He simply raised a hand, and the shadows in the room coalesced, stretching from the corners like grasping tentacles of solid night. Valor charged, shield first, a human battering ram of pure ethos. He smashed through the first wave of shadow tendrils, which shattered like brittle glass against his conviction. Kaelan merely flicked his wrist. The floor beneath Valor erupted. A dozen shadow spikes, hard as obsidian, shot upwards. Valor twisted, his superhuman reflexes allowing him to avoid the worst of it, but one spike caught his leg, gouging a deep wound. He grunted in pain but didn't slow his advance. Finn unleashed a barrage of spells. A brilliant blue stunning hex, a golden disarming charm, a silver chain of a binding curse. Kaelan erected a shimmering shield of darkness with a bored expression, absorbing them all. Crude O'Malley, Kaelan chided. The tools of a blunt instrument. I expected more from a man who prides himself on his cunning. He was toying with them. His power was immense, a vast, controlled ocean against their desperate splashing. He was a chosen one, and he wielded his magic with the terrifying precision of a surgeon. Valor, ignoring the blood streaming down his leg, finally reached him. Swinging his shield in a powerful arc, Kaelan sidestepped, moving with impossible grace, and tapped the captain's chest with 2 fingers. A pulse of pure negative energy sent Valor flying backwards, crashing into the far wall with a sickening crunch. Steve! Finn yelled, his blood running cold. I'm alright, Valor gasped, struggling to push himself up. Kaelan turned his full attention to Finn. Now it's just you. The cynic who found a cause. How disappointingly predictable. The shadows swirled around Finn, pressing in. He felt his own magic stuttering, smothered by Kaelan's overwhelming presence. He was outmatched, outgunned. The old Finn would have run. He would have created a diversion, cut his losses, and vanished into the Undercity to drink away the failure. But the old Finn wasn't here anymore. He looked at Valor, struggling to his feet, a testament to sheer, unbreakable will. He looked at Finch, trapped and helpless, who had believed in him when no one else did. It's not about power, he thought, the memory of Valor's words echoing in his mind. It's about choosing to stand. You're right, Kaelan, Finn said, his voice steady despite the suffocating pressure. I am predictable. He dropped his wand. Kaelan paused, a flicker of genuine surprise crossing his features. Surrendering? Wise. Not surrendering, Finn said, reaching into his pouch. Changing tactics. He pulled out a small, tarnished silver orb. A mnemonic siphon. Highly illegal, highly unstable. Oris used them to forcibly extract memories, but they were decommissioned because of the catastrophic psychic backlash they could cause to the user. Cutting corners. His specialty. Kaelan's eyes widened in recognition. You wouldn't dare. The feedback will shred your mind. You want order? Control. Finn's lips pulled back in a desperate, feral grin. Let's see how you handle a little chaos. He crushed the orb in his hand. Pain. Not physical pain, but a storm of pure, undiluted emotion. Not his own, but Kaelan's. He was flooded with a decade of the Chosen One's anguish, the stench of battlefields, the faces of the dead, the bitter taste of political betrayals, the crushing weight of a prophecy he never asked for. He saw Kaelan's moment of decision, standing over a ravaged village, realizing that saving people one by one was like trying to empty the ocean with a teacup. He felt Kaelan's cold, horrifying epiphany. To save humanity, he had to control it. The psychic shockwave erupted from Finn, invisible and overwhelming. For Finn, it was agony. For Kaelan, who was the source of the memories, it was a cataclysm. The shattered prophecy screamed, clutching his head as his own trauma was weaponized and blasted back at him. His concentration shattered. The shadows in the room recoiled, dissolving into nothing. The crystalline cage around Finch flickered and vanished. Valor, seeing his chance, surged forward, his wounded leg forgotten. With a final, desperate roar, he slammed his shield into Kaelan's chest. The Chosen One, his mind reeling and his defenses gone, was thrown back like a ragdoll, hitting the base of his own throne and slumping to the ground, unconscious. Silence descended. Finn collapsed to his knees, his head throbbing, phantom images flickering at the edge of his vision. He felt a gentle hand on his shoulder. A reckless, dangerous, and utterly brilliant move, my boy, Archmage Finch said, his voice weak but his eyes bright with pride. Remind me to teach you a less self-destructive way of winning a fight. Valor limped over, his face pale but resolute. You did it, Finn. You saved us. Finn managed a weak smile. Told you. A bad Auror trick. They had one. It felt unreal. Kaelan was defeated. Finch was free. They had actually done it. A slow, rhythmic clapping echoed from the shadows behind the throne. Every head snapped up. A figure emerged, stepping out of a distortion in the air. He was impossibly tall and gaunt, clad in robes the color of dried blood. His face was a waxy, skeletal mask, but his eyes burned with ancient, malevolent intelligence. Lord Malakor. He hadn't been a part of the fight. He had been watching. Bravo, Malakor said, his voice a dry rasp of crumbling parchment. A truly spectacular performance. The fallen hero, the man out of time, and the disgraced washout. You've neatly tied up my loose end for me. He gestured dismissively at the unconscious Kaelan. His vision was too sentimental. Valor instinctively raised his shield. Finch began to murmur the incantations for a powerful warding spell. But then a new sound filled the room. A low, broken chuckle. It came from Kaelan, who was stirring, blood trickling from his lips. He pushed himself up on one elbow, his eyes bleary but fixed on the Archmage. You still don't see it, do you? He rasped, his laugh growing stronger, hysterical. You think this was about Malakor? You think I was the endgame? Finn frowned. What are you talking about, Vance? Kaelan's wild gaze shifted from Finn to Valor, then settled on Finch with an expression of profound, tragic pity. Ask him. Kaelan spat, a bloody fleck landing on the obsidian floor. Ask the great Archmage Alistair Finch where the betrayer's wand really is. A sudden, terrible stillness fell over the room. Malakor stopped clapping, a flicker of genuine confusion on his skeletal face. Valor looked from the broken chosen one to his mentor, a deep frown creasing his brow. Finch, what is he talking about? The mischievous twinkle in Alistair Finch's eyes, the one constant in Finn's chaotic new life, vanished. It was snuffed out, replaced by an expression of cold, ancient, and absolute authority. The kindly, eccentric old wizard disappeared, and in his place stood something far older and more dangerous. He raised his empty hand. A simple, gnarled wand of petrified yew, dark and unassuming, materialized in his grip. It didn't crackle with energy or glow with power. It simply absorbed the light around it, radiating a chilling, soul-deep wrongness that dwarfed even Malakor's dark presence. He's talking about this, Finch said, his voice no longer warm and reedy, but a low, powerful baritone that resonated in their very bones. Sometimes, to save the world, you must first be willing to conquer it. His ancient eyes, now devoid of all warmth, swept over them Valor, Finn, Malakor, and Kaelan alike. He was a tool. Malakor was a distraction. And you, my dear boys, he said, a glacial smile touching his lips, were the perfect heroes to place the hinge of fate exactly where I needed it to be.